Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And thanks to Economic Times for inviting me for this third ET CISO annual summit. As we are all aware, virtual is the new reality today. And I find that the subject that you have chosen, that is cybersecurity in the era of hyperconnectivity, is a very relevant and timely subject. And I was just going through your agenda and I find that you have an excellent lineup of speakers and you have covered a range of subjects including IoT, AI/ML, cloud, and all aspects of cybersecurity, including insurance and crypto, as well as critical infrastructure protection. So before I take a deep dive on the cybersecurity aspect, let me just reiterate what the world is saying about India, because we are in the midst of a very unusual circumstances amidst this pandemic. And what the world is saying is how well India has so far managed to curtail the mortality rate of this pandemic as you compare it with the rest of the world. And one of the reasons is that we were one of the first few off the block. And the way our government has functioned, the clarity with which Prime Minister has given his directions, the efficiency with which the Ministry of Home Affairs enacted the Disaster Management Act of 2005 and created those 11 empowered groups, the way the center-state relationship has been, and the way the private sector has responded. And lastly, and not the least, the way the public has responded to the call of the Prime Minister and the government and the states. If all goes well, and I'm really keeping my fingers crossed on this, I think it will be an excellent case study on what is termed as a whole of nation approach to tackle a national pandemic. Don't forget, please, what happened 100 years before. Some of you may not be aware that when the Spanish flu came in 1918, the total affected numbers were about 500 million. And the total people who lost their lives were 50 million. And guess what? Which was the nation which was affected the most, that lost the maximum lives? India. India lost 12 million lives in the Spanish flu of 1918 to 1920. And what is the figure today? You are all aware it is less than 6,000, and the number of affected is also less. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that we continue this way and we are able to beat this deadly flu. Well, on that positive note, let me come to the subject of cybersecurity in the era of hyperconnectivity. Hyperconnectivity, yes, because 5 years back, there were about 17 billion devices connected to the internet. Today, there are 27, from 17 to 27 in 5 years. And they say that by 2030, the number of interconnected devices, especially the IoT devices, will be 50 billion connected on the internet. CISOs are going to have a tough time. So my advice to the CISO, since this is basically a CISO's summit, is firstly, your job is going to become more and more important as the days go by. So it is better if you plan for the future. And a couple of things that I want to give as advice to you is that try and separate the IT people from the cybersecurity people. You know, wherever I've gone, I find that the same people who implemented the networks are the ones who are doing the internal audit, the VAPTs and the testing, etc. You know, this judge and jury sort of a system has to change because cybersecurity is going to become more and more important. We are all aware of the losses taking place and the crime that is taking place. So first advice is, in your cell, create an IT cell and a cybersecurity cell. Second, do follow that 3 network concept, that you have one network which is facing the internet, you have an air-gapped intranet, for administrative purposes in your organization. And then for those who have an industrial systems and the enterprises and the factories where the PLCs are there and the operational technologies are there, that's a totally air-gapped system. That's the core of your network, which has to be protected at all costs. So a three-network system has to be employed. Then you must realize that vulnerabilities will be there. There are three hard truths in the ecosystem of cybersecurity. One is that vulnerabilities will continue to exist. Second is cyber attacks will continue to take place. And third is that attribution will be as difficult as it is today. So we have to live in this environment. So how do we find a solution to that? Well, the solution is that there are some things which you have to do before an incident takes place, and there are some things that you have to do after an incident takes place. That is the CISO job. So before an incident takes place is basically your capacity building, the training that you have to do, the cyber awareness that has to be created. And I've been saying this at every forum. It is the Newman's eighth layer, as it is called. In telecommunications, there is a 7-layer OSI model, the physical layer, data link, network, transport, etc. Those are the 7 layers in which the communication takes place. But there is a Newman's eighth layer, that is the human being himself and his mind, which is the most important. So that person in your enterprise has to be trained well, and you have to ensure that he has some basic concepts of cyber hygiene. So the training of the person has to take place. Your architecture has to change now. In this post-COVID scenario, and I've been speaking to a lot of industry people also, they say, yes, teleworking and remote working was always there, but let's say about 10% people were doing this remote working. From 10, it went up to 90% during COVID. And after COVID, they say it will come down to, say, 50 to 60%. They only need about 40% people to come to office. So 60% will still continue to work from home. So if they continue to work from home, now we have a different model altogether. Now we have to go into details as to what is the endpoint device that they are using in terms of its software, in terms of its antivirus, and what is the access that they have got in their home Wi-Fi system. What are the other devices that are connected to that Wi-Fi system? From that Wi-Fi system and that access point, it is going to a building aggregator, an optical switch. What is the security of the network by the service provider till it comes to your aggregator in the enterprise? Even if a VPN is used, or even if a cloud is being used by most of the enterprises today, what are the security features that you can provide for this distributed network? So your architecture, which was earlier based on an enterprise behind a firewall and the anti-IDS, IPS, and all your behavior analytics systems, has now to change to cater for this distributed system. So how do you monitor? And let me tell you, the products are already coming out. You can go on the internet and see that today, if you want to monitor a distributed work environment, the products are already out. AI, ML based systems as to what are the privileges that you've given to various users, are they actually doing what they are expected to be doing, etc., and how it is monitored, how are the discrepancies monitored. So now the architecture of your system has to change. It's better to prepare for it. It's better to spend some money. I've been going everywhere and saying that at least 10% of your IT budget, at least 10%. That's the global average. If you see all the studies of the countries and various enterprises, how much they've spent, this is a back of the envelope figure of 10% that has come out. It could be more, but it definitely should not be less. So please spend that on the cybersecurity products. Now, having said that, let me also remind you on what the Prime Minister has been saying after our lockdown 1, 2, 3, 4, when the unlock 1.0 happened, and day before yesterday, a couple of days back, when he spoke on the CII summit, there's a very strong message he's sending. He's sending a strong message of make in India, of buying local. So it is better if you start planning for that, because in times to come, I can assure you, sitting in this chair, that the indigenization component is going to grow more and more. And he has mentioned, the Prime Minister has said that it is not only the non-strategic sectors that he's talking of, he's talking of even the strategic sectors. And he mentioned space, he mentioned atomic energy. So even your IT and telecom sectors are part of the strategic sectors. So as a CISO, your mind should start working on that, that in the future, there is a requirement of the nation to use more and more indigenous products. Unfortunately, there are very few projects as of date, but you'll find even the antivirus companies now will get the signal, and you'll find more products. We have a couple of companies. We have Wiki, we have K7, we have a couple of more companies within the country. But I'm sure that with the call of the Prime Minister, you will find more and more of the antivirus. Plus, you will find more and more of the hardware products coming out of our own, routers and switches, etc., and some products in the telecom sector also, both at the radio side as well as the core side. So, as a CISO, you should be aware of the indigenization thrust that is being given. Then also, you should be aware that there is a PDP bill, which I hope gets passed in Parliament in some of the in session of this year. The Personal Data Protection Bill 2019, which may become the PDP 2020 when it is passed. You all have been reading about it as to what it caters for, that there's going to be a Data Protection Authority of India with a chairperson and some 5-6 members. They're going to decide what is critical data, sensitive data, what remains inside the country, what goes outside, cross-border, free flow, etc., and what are the fines. And the fines, I suggest you read the GDPR to just get an idea of what the fines are. So, as and when this bill is enacted into an act, it will result in the creation of data protection officers, also in enterprises. And I'm sure with the crunches that are going on, initially it will be the CISO who will have to perform the role of a data protection officer. So it is better if from this time onwards you start getting into understanding as to what is this concept of a data fiduciary, who is the data processor, what are the aspects of this bill that I have to cater for, what does data protection imply, what is my responsibility, what is somebody else's responsibility, etc. So this is another task that I would advise as a CISO that you can start working on. So I've said a couple of things, separate the IT and the cyber 3 network concept, focus on indigenization, start getting used to data, and cybersecurity education and awareness. So these are some of the aspects that I thought I will highlight. There's a lot of talk of zero trust going on these days. You see, when you have a distributed environment, you just can't trust anyone. In the cyber field, in any case, from the time that we have started learning about cybersecurity, one of the first dictums that was told to us was, don't trust anyone, including the system administrator. That same thing is now being converted to zero trust as to how do we ensure that a person is doing what he is expected to do. So you will have to start going into the aspects of zero trust and what it implies in terms of the tools that are required for it and in terms of the monitoring systems that are required for it. So there is lots to learn. I always feel that if you have to defend your enterprises, you must know how the attacks takes place, right? It's only when you understand how the offensive actions are being done by the criminals that you know what to protect against, right? So the entire kill chain aspect as to how the phishing is done, how the luring is done, how the clickbaiting is done, what is the weaponization, what is the dropper, how does the lateral spread takes place, how does he try to reach the server, obtain the admin rights, gain the privileges, have a constant contact with the command and control. Try and understand all that process because you are there to protect against him, right? So there is no shortcut to cybersecurity. I keep saying it's a marathon without a finish line. So on that note, I would like to wish all the CISOs a very good interactive session in this excellent summit that has been created by Economic Times. And I again thank the organizers for inviting me for this keynote. And I wish the event all success. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.